We can see that Liz is becoming a more and more dangerous place to live. Maps and satellite images show us how housing, climate, and geography are colliding to devastating effect. And though politicians are pushing to fast-track reconstruction after the fires of January 2025, evidence from past fires suggests we've reached a tipping point.
People are going to have to come to the recognition that you can't rebuild the way it was.
We analysed the latest views from above and overlaid them with the maps that really matter, to ask whether the 2025 fires can finally force LA's ever-expanding suburbs to pull back from the brink. All fire needs is fuel, oxygen, and heat. In early January 2025, LA had all three in abundance. Take a look at these satellite images of Altadena in Los Angeles County from January the 6th. We can see modest single-story homes on small plots of land, surrounded by trees and shrubs. And here, over in the more affluent Pacific Palisades neighborhood, multi-million-dollar estates with ocean views, again surrounded by greenery. By January the 10th, both neighborhoods had been reduced to ash. Take a look at these side-by-side street view images of Sunset Boulevard. These colonial-style wood-framed homes were little more than kindling. California has seen too many times before, dense housing and dry vegetation don't mix. Where the two meet is known as a wildland-urban interface. Between 1990 and 2020, 45% of new homes in California were built in these transition zones. The Eaton and Palisades fires both occurred in places like this. No wonder that when fire comes, as it always does, it is becoming more and more destructive to people and property. This study found that of all the structures destroyed by wildfire between 1985 and 2013, more than 80% were in the zone where homes and nature meet.
We've known for decades now about the emergence of these risks in these high-risk areas, and yet we've done very little to essentially move people out of harm's way.
Many now see 2025 as a turning point, the time to finally reconsider LA's urban sprawl. Looking back at fires from California's past suggests that when Los Angeles does recover, it may look very different. Take these two fires that occurred over 50 years apart, similar location and scale, but the outcomes were very different. In 1964, the Hanley Fire in Sonoma County scorched nearly 56,000 acres, but destroyed only 108 homes. No one died. Aerial images from the time show that apart from vegetation, there was very little else to burn. Fast forward to October 2017 and look at the same landscape. Thousands of closely packed homes nestled among the trees. So when the Tubbs Fire of October that year ignited, the result was very different. It claimed 22 lives and destroyed more than 5,600 structures. One of the hardest hit neighborhoods was the Coffey Park area in Santa Rosa. Around 1,500 homes were destroyed here in a single day. Take another example, Paradise, California. A ridgetop community in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountain range. Many working-class families moved to this part of California in the 1960s for its affordability. Ryan Miller's family was one of them.
My family, literally, we used to kind of think a little bit about wildfire risk and joke about it. But we used to say, I mean, we don't really have fire risk. We're not on the edge of town. The whole town would have to burn down for our house to be at risk.
Heavenly Father, please help us.
But on November the 8th, 2018, a fire tore through Ryan's community, destroying his mobile home and more than 80% of the properties in the area. The Camp Fire became one of the deadliest in US history, claiming 85 lives and destroying more than 18,000 structures. Seven years later, you can still see the empty plots where homes used to be. We can see that Paradise is being rebuilt, but all these years later, less than half of the population has returned. Will this be the fate of Altadena or Pacific Palisades in LA?
There's still a really big shortage of especially affordable apartments, and we haven't really replaced that affordable housing stock. So the region's kind of been permanently transformed by just losing 14,000 houses overnight.
Ryan and his family are scattered across different parts of California. They couldn't afford to rebuild. Ryan decided to track down where his neighbors ended up settling, and he made this map. It shows Paradise residents scattered across almost every state in the US. Of the displaced people he surveyed, over 40% said they had no intention of returning.
I think for a lot of people too, there was a sense that that property was associated with that trauma that maybe they didn't want to relive. I think it made a lot more sense, both financially and also just psychologically, to move on from that property.
The pine trees of Paradise used to offer shade and a sense of privacy. But much of the woodland has now been removed to reduce the risk of fire. This map shows the tree loss over time.
I want to see Paradise recover. I don't necessarily think it should look exactly like it did in 2018 again. Maybe it wasn't the best place to have 26,000 people.
Will this be what the rebuilt suburbs of LA will look like, more sparsely populated with less vegetation? Or, like in the case of Coffey Park after the Tubbs fire, will they simply be rebuilt almost exactly as they were before? Many say that LA should never have been allowed to expand as much as it did in the first place. You could say the blueprint for these flammable suburbs was laid down more than 100 years ago. In the 19th century, the government encouraged people to move out west with the promise of cheap land. The growth of LA coincided with the advent of the motor car, meaning city suburbs could afford to sprawl far and wide. Farming and the oil industry boom saw LA's population jump from 170,000 in 1900 to 2.2 million by 1930. Homes were built primarily with wood for its ability to withstand small earthquakes, but it made them more vulnerable to fire. Over the decades, properties stretched further up among the ridges and ravines north of LA and along the coast. Most suburbs were designated for single-family homes like these.
Homes for all incomes. New, original, architecturally exciting.
Today, it is the second most populous city in the United States, after New York City. But unlike New York, LA grew out, not up. And this is where urban sprawl is meeting climate change head-on.
Our infrastructure that we have built in this country is built for a climate of the past, a climate that no longer exists.
This map shows how year-round temperatures have been steadily increasing in LA. Average temperatures in LA County have risen around 4 degrees Fahrenheit in the past 50 years.
We see in some parts of the West, we now have an additional 2 more months of fire weather days now compared to the 70s.
Here, the heat combined with the winds that funnel through the canyons and valleys contributes to the intensity of fires. 19 of the 20 largest fires in California's history have occurred in the past 25 years. Research by the University of Colorado Boulder, using 2 decades of NASA satellite data, suggests that fires are also spreading faster than ever before.
If we have strong winds coming in, sometimes they're 60 miles per hour, sometimes they're 100 miles per hour. If there is a fire that has been ignited, that wind will spread the fire so quickly across the landscape that's already fire prone.
This map shows the drought conditions in the LA region in the 6 months leading up to the 2025 fires. Over the same period, LA received just 1/1600ths of an inch of rainfall, making it the second driest on record since the late 1800s. Even before the fires, data shows that 1 in 10 properties in Los Angeles County were at very high risk of fire. Climate change and associated extreme weather events displaced 2.5 million Americans in 2023. Of the more than 150,000 Angelenos displaced by the January 2025 fires, how many will risk returning?
About 1% of the U.S. population in recent years, every year, is being displaced by natural hazards. Some are not related to climate, but about 1/5 of those people will never return home.
For those who do choose to stay and rebuild, costs will only go up. Changes to building codes means you can't just replace like for like. Around 85% of the homes destroyed in the recent LA fires were built before 1980. In 2008, California implemented stricter codes that required new homes to be built with ember-resistant roofs and vents, as well as external wall insulation. A study by the National Bureau of Economic Research shows that homes built after 2008 are 40% less likely to be destroyed by wildfires. Take a look at this damage map of Altadena. Every red house symbol is a property that has been at least 50% destroyed by fire. And if you look closely, every once in a while, you'll see one of these so-called miracle homes, seemingly untouched while the properties around them turn to dust. The result of pure chance, modern building specifications, or even prompt intervention from fire services.
There's really no such thing as a fireproof home. You can build a home to a higher standard that's fire resistant, but there's no such thing as a zero risk building in that regard.
Building back better can be expensive. Adding basic fire-resistant features can cost around $10,000, with more extensive renovations reaching up to around $100,000. Demand for builders and materials to reconstruct LA's over 12,000 destroyed structures may also drive up costs. Realtor.com estimates the cost of rebuilding a home in Altadena at over $250,000 and around $1 million in Pacific Palisades. Wildfires also push up house prices and rent elsewhere as people displaced by fires compete over fewer homes.
We've seen this throughout the history of California in recent years, where in a post-fire context, people come back and they actually double down and build at a higher standard of performance in these post-fire areas, build bunker-like type buildings that significantly increase the cost and the value of housing, and that actually operates as well to drive people out.
Look at the car. Oh my gosh.
In Pacific Palisades, after the 2025 fire, architect Michael Kovac returned to find his home intact.
These walls are, you can see the edge here. It's a few, maybe a centimeter and a bit thick, and it's a super dense fiber cement panel.
Michael had sprinklers fitted inside as well as out.
When people see the big air tankers dropping the orange fire retardant in wildfires, that's what this is. So this is a material that's designed to be sprayed onto the landscaping or any surface that you're trying to keep from burning.
The system worked, but defenses like this are expensive, and increasingly fire survival is becoming a preserve of the wealthy.
And I think, frankly, the insurance side will drive us too. Like if insurance says, we're not going to insure your house unless you can demonstrate something like this that will make it happen.
Building codes in LA have improved in recent years, but the city doesn't insist on quite that level of protection. And there are signs that as the city looks to rebuild once again, it will prioritize recovery and reconstruction over safety.
The real estate industry is passing on the risk. That's part of their business model. On the other end, we see a kind of willful negligence, a gross negligence sometimes by policymakers to just overlook these underlying risks. Why? Because they get the short-term benefits of addressing housing and the housing crisis, and they can pass on the buck or the responsibility for climate risk to somebody else.
California Governor Gavin Newsom and Mayor Karen Bass issued orders in January 2025 designed to speed up reconstruction. California has had a hard time learning its lessons before. A study looking at the aftermath of fires between 1970 and 2009 found that almost 60% of buildings destroyed by the flames were replaced within 6 years. And there was little evidence that the newer homes would stand any better chance of resisting future fires. It seems to be a cycle of build, burn, and repeat.
I'm not terribly optimistic. Those are strong influences politically, and they could very well align with the housing and real estate agenda to just rebuild at any cost. I think we know exactly what we need to do, but it's going to come at a very large economic and political cost.
It's not clear whether Los Angeles will build homes in at-risk areas like this again. The very same area that suffered the Franklin, Woolsey, and Thomas fires, and others in between.
So I think one of the drivers of development out into these dangerous zones has been this kind of old school, and I would argue outdated version of the American dream. But I think that maybe obsession and the centering of that dream in the way we plan our communities has created a lot of this risk. So we've got to reshape where our new housing goes.
The cost of rebuilding, combined with the increased fire risk, brings with it another headache: insurance. For insurance companies, the fire risk is proving too great, and the numbers no longer add up. Between 2020 and 2022, firms cancelled 2.8 million homeowner policies in California. Over 500,000 of these cancellations were in Los Angeles County. State Farm, California's biggest insurance company, cancelled 72,000 policies less than a year before the latest LA fires, refusing to offer renewals. What we're seeing since the January 2025 fires is that people with homes that survived but were rendered uninhabitable by smoke damage are not getting payouts. The latest LA wildfires are expected to be the costliest in US history, with losses exceeding $250 billion, according to one estimate.
We are kind of running out of options, and I think people don't really understand what a huge problem that is, because there's always been kind of some safety, something to fall back on, someone to help you rebuild, pay for the costs.
Altadena, not for sale. Altadena.
Experts suggest the result may be climate gentrification,
Big developers need to stay out.
where only the rich remain.
What we see in general in the United States in a post-disaster context is really only the wealthiest people are able to return, or at least return before everyone else. And so those who are underinsured or not insured at all, or have a lower net wealth to be able to cover the loss that they've incurred, they struggle, and they struggle to return.
Over 9,000 structures were destroyed in January's Eaton fire. In Altadena, black households were disproportionately hit by the fires. Nearly half of their homes were destroyed or badly damaged, compared to 37% of non-black households. A UCLA report puts this disparity down to the concentration of black families in western parts of Altadena, in part a legacy of historical racial segregation practices.
This is my block right here. This is where I live, or where I lived.
Let's get you a safe exit out of here so you don't get a nail in your foot.
How would the cacti survive? Nothing prepares you for this amount of destruction. I mean, There's no manual, there's no book.
The community was already at the lower end of the area's income scale. Studies suggest residents are, as a result, now less likely to be able to afford to rebuild. The fires may well entrench the wealth and racial divides that have always been a feature of LA.
Everything that we know and love is gone. Not just this house, my whole city gone, man, the whole thing.
Even after a wildfire is controlled, the danger isn't over. This map shows how January's fires affected LA's air quality.
There were a lot of buildings that burned, a lot of cars that burned, and so it released a lot of toxic contaminants into the air. Lots of lead, arsenic, asbestos, different plastics were also burned a lot. And so that all goes into the air, and it can travel as far as 150 miles.
Studies suggest it can take months for the toxic particles in the air to clear. But it's the ground that will take far longer to treat. Clearing up the surface debris can take a matter of weeks, but the task of rehabilitating the soil could take years.
But even after the wildfires, we have a lot of ash and toxic debris. A lot of that can stay on the land for a long time until it rains. And when it rains, it gets really concerning because then all that toxic debris goes into our waterways and into our oceans.
Take a look at Lahaina in Hawaii. Satellite images show that over a year and a half after the fires of August 2023, almost nothing has returned. Authorities here needed to remove 400,000 tons of fire debris. According to a recent survey, 1 in 5 fire-affected households is considering leaving Maui. A recent poll shows that the majority of Los Angeles County residents don't plan on leaving. California is at a crossroads. The question remains who will be able to stay and at what price. If businesses impacted by the fires also leave town, that will further hamper LA's recovery. There are fears that the movie industry, still recovering from COVID-19 lockdowns and the writers and actors strike, will also suffer.
This is definitely a very rough time for Los Angeles and, of course, for the film industry. Is definitely going to change the face of the population and the industry of Los Angeles. There's only so much you can take, and everybody has a breaking point. Everybody has a time when they have to be very honest with themselves and say, can I keep doing this, or do I need to do something else?
There's also the psychological impact of fleeing a fire, of losing a home and a whole community. The trauma for some will prove too much.
I feel broken, I feel lost, I feel devastated. I don't want to have to tell my boys that this was their home and it's gone.